I am, of course, as we have been discussing, a flightless bird, or rather, I should say, I have been these last 40 years transitioning into my ultimate and superior form, the flightless bird, as I mentioned previously. So stay tuned and listen to the rest of this very interesting interview, and you will learn more about the process of evolution than you've ever imagined possible.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Traditional Press. I hope you all had the most amazing Christmas holiday that you've ever had in your entire life. I hope that this New Year has been great. I hope that Christmas was awesome. I hope that you got 1,000 presents under your tree, or at least had the happiest, healthiest day that you've ever had in your life. I hope that the Christmas spirit was flowing free within your family. I had a great Christmas. Missed you guys. But I'm glad to be back here on the Traditional Press, and we are going to be talking about macroevolution versus microevolution, and we are going to be talking about this because people be crazy. So, what's the difference? Macroevolution, microevolution. A lot of you might know this, so, if you know already, don't be embarrassed embarrassed? If you know already, don't be annoyed that I'm going to be telling you about a definition that you already know. But macroevolution is the idea that species are capable of changing from one species to another species. Microevolution is the idea that a dog can be bred to have longer legs and be a little bit faster and have a longer snout, or be shorter, better for getting into little holes and going after badgers and such. And the difference between macroevolution and microevolution scientifically is that one has been proven and the other one has never been proven, ever. Not once, ever, in the history of all of time. The idea, of course, was popularized by Charles Darwin in his Origin of Species. He went to this incredible place called the Galapagos Islands, and he discovered all these incredible species, and he studied them to an incredible degree, and he found that animals evolve in terms of microevolution, something that, frankly, any trainer of any animal or any lineage with any great degree of lineage, the Arabian horse trainers could have told him that species evolve, and it is incredibly important to maintain a good bloodline in things like competitive horse racing, because the bloodline determines whether or not your horse is going to be better or worse. And a better bloodline is going to fetch a higher percentage market share, and the reason for that is basic genetics. If your daddy and your mama were good racers, you're going to be a good racer most likely. So it's a simple issue. Darwin really did not need to study this. Everybody has known this basically from the dawn of time, but he discovered that all species do this, and they do this without human intervention. So I guess that part of what he researched and all of that kind of stuff may not have been widely known in the world before. So this little bit of scientific inquiry that he did may have been brand new, and that's pretty interesting. It's very, very cool that a particular type of finch can develop a beak that is longer than another of its brethren in order to be able to get into a crevice better, and in order to better feed itself, better survive in the environment. And of course, the Origin of Species talks about survival of the fittest, and the most fit form of that particular species is going to survive better in its environment than another form with a shorter beak, smaller wings, longer feet, whatever it might be. And what's very, very interesting is, in terms of microevolution, you would think longer wingspan is always better, but it's not true. The animal called a goshawk, it actually has a smaller wingspan, which is better for navigating through deep woods, going through the thickets and nabbing its prey. Owls typically have a smaller wingspan than larger birds of prey, like eagles or, some other, enormous bird like that, or a turkey vulture or something like that. And the reason for that is because owls typically navigate denser wooded areas, and so they're better equipped at catching small game in those localities. But the question becomes very quickly, when we start thinking about evolution from a rational perspective, is it really better to evolve? And that's the whole idea, the whole issue with the idea of macroevolution. So scientists use their scientific method in order to ask questions about the world and in order to receive answers. We also are going to use the scientific tools handed down to us by our forebears. We are going to use dialectic inquiry. And this is a form of science in which we are going to ask questions in order to get logic out of the situation. The purpose of our method is to ask whether or not something is capable of happening logically. So, for example, Aristotle did an incredible amount of work on species. He wasn't right about everything, but he was right about a ton of the things that he discovered in his work on species. And he had none of the tools of scientific research that we have today. He figured them out rationally. The rational tools are the most powerful scientific tools that we have at our disposal. For example, a scientist is held at bay by the limits of his tools. He can go no further than his tools. So, for example, if a scientist is studying geology, he is going to be using computer models to be able to get answers from inputs that he's going to input into this computer model. And that'll tell him things like the age of a particular piece of sediment, the speed of degradation of a silt in a particular landslide. Is going to be able to tell, okay, well, what's the tensile strength of this rock? I mean, just a ton of things are going to be able to come out of the computer models, and you're going to get all your predictions out of this. The weather obviously is all prediction based because it's based on computer models, and we use Doppler radars and other things in order to study weather patterns. And astrophysicists also used computer models. I mean, most of the telescopes that we have today aren't just big tubes with glass on one end and glass on another. It's digital. And we're using digital tools in order to get more answers. But there's a major problem with this. Who codes the program? And what are their inherent biases? Everybody has an inherent bias. Everybody. You cannot live without an inherent bias. So the science that's being done today is being done from the bias of macroevolution. And this is really holding us back scientifically. There's a ton of research and development that could be taking place right now that is being stunted because of bad science and using poor scientific tools. So when you go to studies, say, for example, astrophysics, there is a set computer model that has been tested by, X number of years, X number of scientists, and you're going to plug all of your calculations and formulations into this computer model, and it's going to spit out data, and you're going to be able to go further and add more onto the programs and get more data and, update things. But the problem is all of the computer models for astrophysicists today begin with the idea of a Big Bang. And astrophysicists ran into a major wall because the results weren't matching up from their inquiries to their models. And they were having a big issue. And so now, right now, as we're speaking, the Big Bang is being thrown out. And the Big Bang was taught as absolute verifiable fact for 50 plus years, 100 years maybe. I don't know, a long time. And now scientists are like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. There's something majorly wrong with this particular plan. And the reason why astrophysicists were stumped for so long is because they were using cruddy models. And their presuppositions, what they pre-programmed into their starting basis, was poor quality ideas that had no basis in fact. It was just an idea in order to and come up with an idea for origination of the universe. Somebody came up with the idea of the Big Bang, and the physicists are like, well, great. We don't have to have God, so this is perfect. We're going to run with this. And the major scientific world moved in that direction because it's a secular world currently. Science was not always a secular field of study. Some of the most incredible, just, absolutely mind-blowing research was done by Christian or, of other faith scientists throughout the world. I mean, think about Isaac Newton, a very, very prominent Christian. Think about the clash between Galileo and the Catholic Church. Everybody says, well, the Catholic Church was at fault. No, Galileo was trying to throw down the Catholic Church. That was why he was in trouble. Look it up. Do your research. Don't just believe little stupid thumbnails that you see on the internets. Like, you could literally go onto virtually any historical site and you're like, oh, Galileo was a jerk. What the heck? What's wrong with this guy? And you don't never hear this. And the major issue that I have today is with the mainstream scientific method that we have, because people are operating under biases and not acknowledging that they're operating under biases and then saying that their biases are verified as fact when they have never been verified. They're operating off of faith for the past 50 to 100 years that the universe began with the Big Bang. Faith. They have never proved it, not once. But I'm getting off subject with the Big Bang, and it's important to talk about that because it's one area. But what I want to focus on really is the idea of macroevolution, the idea that a turtle can turn into a, iguana. And the question that you should immediately ask when you hear that a turtle has the capability of turning into an iguana is, why? Why would it do that? What is the benefit to a turtle to turning into an iguana? You say, well, it just happens. It's random chance. Okay. Random chance. Really? That's your plan? Random chance. I want you to think about this for a minute, because if things are just randomly going to turn into other things, then that means that chaos, actual chaos, is the foundational principle upon which the world is built, upon which the universe is built. And you say, okay, well, chaos theory says that if things are going to randomly turn into other things, well, then we cannot know with any degree of certainty what anything is going to do ever, because it's chaotic. That is the definition of chaotic. And if we say, well, that's not what we really mean. I mean, we really can study the universe. It's just there's a little bit of chaos going on here. That's not good enough. If you mean chaos, you must mean actually chaotic. And if it is actually chaotic, then there cannot be an order to the cosmos. There cannot be an order to why an organism needs to feed itself. There cannot be an order to offspring, to reproduction, to growth cycles, to mitosis within cells, because it's chaos. It's random. Anything could happen at any time. The transition between turtle and iguana is so enormous that you would have to have either the most unbelievable chaotic, chaos could never do it. It's impossible. It's physically impossible. Totally impossible. And the reason that it's impossible is an iguana is a good thing, a functional thing, a complete thing. Chaos doesn't create complete things. Chaos does chaotic things. That is the definition of chaos. And if you're going to have chaotic action and reaction, then that means that certain laws of, normally the nucleus of the cell is going to operate in this way, and the proteins are going to line up this way, and, the electrons are going to spin this way in response to the neutrons spinning this way. Why? It's chaotic. Now the electrons aren't going to spin that way. Now the atoms are going to fly apart, and that's the new way. And now turtles turn into dust. It's chaos. It's absolute chaos. Anything could happen at any time. And the major problem with the evolutionary theory is they never, ever actually believe in chaos. You can't believe in chaos because if you believe in chaos, you can't do science. You don't know what's going to happen. It's impossible to know what's happening because it could do anything at any time. But the evolutionary theory is, well, okay, the turtle is transitioning into an iguana because the iguana has a better percentage chance of living, and it's going to have a greater opportunity for survival of the fittest. It's going to outcompete. So now we're saying, okay, wait a minute. You never meant chaos. You meant that the iguana is better than the tortoise or the turtle. The iguana is better than the turtle. That is what you actually mean. Okay. All right. So we're going to throw out the chaos because that's insane. Think about it for 5 minutes and you will realize how insane chaos theory is. Insane. Okay, so chaos theory's gone. Now we have the idea, okay, one thing is better than another thing. Okay, by what metric are we measuring that? Why is an iguana better than a turtle? Why? Does an iguana live a happier life than a turtle? I don't think so. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of that scientifically. So what is it specifically? We say, well, okay, maybe an iguana has the ability to outcompete a turtle because it's much faster, it can climb, its diet is easier to achieve, it doesn't have as many predators. Okay, all right, we can say those things. And we're going to think on that for a minute. And I'm going to ask some other questions, because if we're saying that actual survival, macroevolutionary survival, is the primary motivating engine for a cell to decide to do something differently, like what exactly is making this decision here? Like, is the turtle sitting down on a rock, stroking its chin, saying, you know what would be great? If I had sticky feet. That would be awesome. You know what? Cellular structure here. I think you need to give me sticky feet. You say, no, that's not how it happens. A turtle is born with sticky feet and it outcompetes the other turtles. Okay, all right. We'll go with that theory. Because the theory that the turtle is deciding, or the cells are deciding, what's deciding this exactly? You say, well, the environment's deciding. What is it that you actually mean when you say that the environment is deciding that a turtle with sticky feet is doing better than actually, I don't even think iguanas have sticky feet. More flexible feet. I know they have more flexible feet. Maybe it's turning into a gecko. I don't know, with sticky pads on its feet. Okay, what is it that's actually making that decision? That would be your God. That would be the universe. If you say the environment is deciding that these things are going to outcompete, you mean that your God has decided that this turtle is better than that turtle. That's what you mean. And the reason that we know that that's what you mean is because that which decides what succeeds and what fails, that which decides what is actually superior to another thing, is the highest moral authority, is the creative engine of the universe, and is the source of all being. And that's the universe. You are a pantheist, and that is why you believe that one animal can evolve into another animal at the whim of the universe. The universe has created a system in which evolutionary survival is benefited according to the system developed by the universe. The universe has created a system that has a logical line that says, okay, if you're here, in order to get to here, what you must do is something like this. You must complete this algorithmic cycle. You must complete these biological marker changes in order to achieve this end result and be a superior product. And if you do something differently, for example, a turtle is born with small eyes and can't see as well, you are going to be less capable of competing with the rest of the turtles, and you are going to die out. You are not going to be able to produce offspring because you can't find a mate. So you must do something which is beneficial according to the rules that I, the universe, have decided. That is what you actually mean. And we can talk about whether or not pantheism makes sense as a moral structure, as a religion, but we're not going to. I have plenty more to say on that subject. Believe that, but we're not going to today. So, there's a logical order to the universe. So what I would like is for all of the macroevolutionary theorists out there to stop saying that there is no God, because you do not believe that there is no God. You believe that the universe is God. It's very important. Define your beliefs. You cannot define your beliefs by that in which you do not believe. It's almost as insane as chaos theory, which I know chaos theory is a whole nother thing. That's not what I'm talking about. It's the idea of chaotic mitosis, chaotic transfiguration, transmogrification, perhaps chaotic transmogrification. I don't know. Maybe we'll come up with a phrase to describe this later, but we're not gonna get into that. So, if you believe that there is a path to perfection, now I have to ask you another question. Remember, we're using the dialectic method in order to reason out whether or not this idea of macroevolution makes any sense whatsoever. We're using the first science, the most ancient science, the greatest science. And I'm going to show you why it's the greatest science through this process. If you believe that there is a path to perfection, what you must believe is that the turtle is inferior to the iguana or the gecko. So now I'm going to propose several other animals to you for consideration. I'm going to propose to you the bee. The humble bumblebee is in the news a lot lately. I should say the honeybee is more in the news. The bumblebee is less in the news, even though they're far more adorable. But the regular honeybee is in the news a lot because of a thing called TCC, or total colony collapse. And bees are just dying like crazy, and people can't figure out what's going on. And there's all this study, and pyrethroid insecticides were, practically about to be banned. And in fact, in several counties around the United States, they were banned. They are banned in plenty of places around the world because people were spraying them indiscriminately, and it was contributing to TCC. And, these colonies were collapsing, but they were doing all these other crazy things, like putting, 10,000 bees in a semi-truck, in multiple colonies in semi-trucks, and driving them around the world and pollinating entire farms with these semi-truck loads full of bees. And the bees got so stressed out from always having to figure out new fields and not being able to develop, new plans and, insecticides and other stressing factors. And maybe they just got car sick. I don't know. But whole colonies were just dying, hundreds of thousands of dead bees lying in the road. I mean, shocking images that you can look up for this stuff. So, is the bee superior or inferior? And according to what standard? Is not a wasp a superior creature to a bee? Wasps are significantly more ferocious than bees. They live longer. They have, no predators practically, unless you live in the Amazon and a tree frog will come after you. And even then, you have, I just read an article that even their reproductive organs can be used as weapons to attack tree frogs when they attack them. Wasps are nuts. They terrify me, by the way, but wasps are insane. They're way tougher, they're smarter, and they are little hunters, and in every way, they outcompete bees. So the question is, well, wouldn't it be better for the bees to turn into wasps? For the bees, maybe. You're less likely to die. I mean, if a bee stings you, it literally dies. It cannot survive multiple stings. Wasps are over there stinging everybody all day long. They love stinging. And the bees are over here working their butts off all day long every day, and the amount of energy that they have to put into pollinating and feeding the queen and other things, the wasps basically put into themselves. So the wasps have a superior life cycle, lifestyle, and longevity to the bees. They do better. Unless you're the queen, life as a bee is not that hot. Or maybe a drone. All you have to do is make babies. What a life. And the wasps are over here in smaller numbers. They're far more ferocious. Hardly anything goes after them. And they're not afraid of anything. So the question is, well, wouldn't it be better for a bee to transition into a wasp? And the question that I have immediately is, what would we do without bees? Imagine the devastation that would occur if bees transition into another form of life? Anything. What if they say, well, we're done pollinating and we just want to live off of aphids? We're going to do better. We're going to farm aphids like some forms of ants do. And the reality is it would be better for the bee to transition into another form. I mean, what if they developed armor, for example, and they, like the wasp does, the carapace of a wasp is significantly more resilient to external damage than the carapace of a honeybee. And, what if they developed, more superior stingers and they became carnivorous like the wasps? They stopped just eating all this honey all the time. What would happen? Well, you would then see why giant amounts of bees dying on the news is such a big deal. It's because we wouldn't be able to pollinate anything and all the plants would die. So the reality is, with the situation of the bee, bees are perfect. We don't want them to change. We want them to stay exactly the way that they are. We want them to be protected. That's our job as humans, by the way, is to protect the world. We're lords of the earth. We're supposed to protect these poor bees. Not, defame them by saying that they're an inferior product that's waiting to evolve, because that mindset leads to catastrophic destruction of organisms. And the bee is perfect. And then you say, well, wait a minute. That's not what we're talking about here with macroevolution. They don't have to transition into wasps. Maybe they can just get the armor and the extra stinger and they'll keep pollinating for us. And the question then becomes, well, why don't the wasps pollinate? Maybe it's because the wasps serve a purpose too. You ever thought of that? The wasps are a necessary part of the ecosystem. And even when they go after the bees, which they do, a lot of wasps eat bees for dinner, it's good for the environment. Because the relationship between predator and prey is a fragile relationship. If the bees get too strong, you make too many bees. And guess what? You can actually have too many bees, and what will happen is war in the heavens. Little mini bees killing each other all over the place, and it gets catastrophic, and then there's not enough food. Then they start, starving to death, and then they, there's all these problems that come when there's too much prey and not enough predators. The wasps are critical. We say, well, and the reality is this. They say, well, I think that I could build a better bee. That's the reality of what we're talking about here. The macroevolutionists all really honestly believe this one thing. They think that, well, I could have built a better bee. I could have made a bee that was more resilient to pesticides, more resilient to stress, more resilient to everything. Why'd they make these bees so weak? And they never stop to consider the fact that that's retarded. You could never make a better bee. You can imagine a better bee, but you couldn't make one. You can't make anything yourself, practically. You can make little machines. But the bees are these incredible organisms. And the difference between a bee and a wasp doesn't look that extraordinary from the outside, really. One's about this big, the other one's about this big, and then it's got wings, they got legs, they got little stingers, incredibly similar insects. But as soon as you go past the macro size differences, that what you can see with the naked eye, and you start getting deep in there, you're like, dude, the differences between these things are fundamental. The hundreds of thousands of proteins necessary to make one wing are so astronomically different from the wing of the wasp that it would blow your mind if you actually researched it. And when you look at the one creature versus another creature, like, these things are not the same at all. Which one of these things is not like the other? Well, they are nothing alike, honestly. Like, when you get down deep in there and you start looking at the molecular structure and then the proteins and the anatomical structure of these things, they are nowhere similar. Nothing at all similar. And then the incredible hubris of the modern world is to say, well, I can imagine a better bee. Therefore, this bee is not as good as it could be. And they never stop to consider what would happen if you started changing the bees. Would you develop a killer bee? That doesn't sound so great. But that's what humans do when they have this particular philosophy. And that's why your presuppositions are so dramatically important. You say, well, I would make a tougher, stronger, more ferocious bee, and now I've created a menace to society, a bee that kills all the other bees, that doesn't care about making honey, that only cares about robbing nests and destroying and building these enormous hives that chase you down, and you can't even live within 100 miles of a killer bee nest because they will chase you down and kill you. And that's what humans do. You don't want ferocious bees. You want nice, soft, gentle honeybees that kind of protect themselves if they get into danger. A little sting, which is not very uncomfortable, but nothing at all like, 1,000 bees swarming after you because you came within 50 feet of their hive. Will sting you to death. It's insane. Why would you change that? You don't want to change the honeybee. You want it to be exactly the way that it is. Why? Because it is perfect the way that it is. You give it more armor. You give it more ferocity. You give it more battle grace in order to withstand the rigors of a difficult environmental experience. And you destroy them. They're not bees anymore. They're menaces. They're evil. They're destructive. And you did it. And this is your plan. Why did you do this? You eliminate the protection, the safety, the softness of the bee, and you destroy it. Don't make the bees hard. It's not good for them, and it's not good for us, and it's not good for the environment. It's not good for anything. It just destroys. So I have a major problem with this idea that, this one type of species is better than this type of species. No, it isn't. Are you out of your mind? You don't know anything about that species, and if you were to change it, you would ruin it. You would destroy that species. That species is perfect for its time and its environment and itself. And us. It's perfect in every way. And that's the real issue, because and bees is just one tiny example. Think about smaller units. They say, the first cell is what changed, what transmogrificated into something else. Think about the little fungi and bacteria that break down rotting wood in the forest. What if that bacteria says, there's really not enough rotting wood, there hasn't been enough floods and hurricanes in order to provide us with enough food source, so we're going to change into a slime mold instead. And it's not going to break down the wood nearly as fast. And then all of a sudden there is a problem. And all these hurricanes happen, and now the wood isn't being broken down, and the wood swallows and suffocates the forest. All because the bacterias and the molds that were supposed to do their job of breaking down the wood changed into something else which was more conducive to their environment. Any time that you mess with nature, you break it. Humans can destroy everything. We could destroy the whole universe if we wanted to. We could. We can develop planet killers and blow them all up eventually if we wanted to. We could blow up everything. Human beings have the ability to utterly ruin everything. Or we can save it. We can preserve it. We can tend to it like a garden, and we can treat it like it's a good thing. And if we say, it needs to evolve, okay, what are you going to do now if you think that those, little plant spores, those little fungi need to evolve? What are you going to do about it? You're going to put those things to the test, put them in through, develop a new strain of bacteria that can eat through, living tissue too, and then it'll eat the whole forest? Like, what's wrong with you? Stop ruining the whole universe. I'm getting a little fired up, but it's true. People are developing, these scientists, they have no moral compunctions to stop anything. They're just like, evolve. Whatever we're doing right now isn't good enough. We need to progress to some unknown something or another because we're not great. Transhumanism, trans-universality, tranny everything. And the reality is, once you do this, you break it. You're like a bull in a china shop. And it doesn't make, not only is it totally illogical, but it is utterly destructive to believe this. It is destructive. It is destroying of everything that is beautiful to believe in these sorts of things. Microevolution, on the other hand, is simple. It's very simple, you know? The bees have found themselves in a situation where they have to fly a little bit farther, so they've developed an extra millimeter of length under their wings in order to fly a little bit farther, a little bit tougher. It's beautiful. It's great. It's within the scope of what their DNA will allow them to do. And science has been discovering now that every single organism has a range of possibilities that it can develop within. Plants know that they can do certain things, and deeply embedded in their DNA, they know that they can shoot out a little bit of, chemical toxins, and they can develop this ability to do this in order to withstand predators. If they have begun to experience a drought cycle and they're not getting enough water and they're getting eaten too much, blah, 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 they can do this. But they can't start shooting fire. It'll never happen. And in order to get a plant to start shooting fire out of its little flower petals, you have to have a human break it. You have to destroy it. Would it be better at surviving if it could literally shoot little missiles at bees and wasps and aphids and fungi and bacteria when it comes to attack it? Yeah, sure, it would be better. But do we want to build this? That doesn't sound like a good plan to me. Plants, animals, you, me, we all have built into our DNA a range of possibilities. Humans can be born 2 feet tall and 10 feet tall or whatever the actual range is, but you can never get beyond that range. And most of the time it's like a potentiality issue where it's like, okay, you can go from here to here. And I haven't even talked about the whole issue of mutations. Everybody says, oh, it's mutations, it's mutations. Anybody who says that doesn't know anything at all about mutations. And the reason that I can say that is because anyone who's ever studied mutations know that mutations are a bad thing. Doesn't matter what the comic books are telling you. If something's mutated, it is ill. It's sick. It's not healthy. Look at any of the animals that are around a environmental disaster like Chernobyl. They're ill. They don't live as long. They get cancer. That's what mutations do. When you hear mutation, you should think cancer. It's not giving them superpowers. It's a fantasy. It's an absolute fantasy. It doesn't happen. It will never happen. Not ever. And then we're going to come to the other issue here. And this is what I'm going to wrap this whole discussion up with. Macroevolution is taught in every major institution in the world. As a fact. As a fact. It has never been proven, not once, ever, in all of the history of the world, macroevolution has never been proven, ever. Not one piece of evidence has ever come into existence, ever. 0 pieces of evidence to prove macroevolution. 0. Not even a millimeter of progress has been made in proving macroevolution, but it's taught everywhere as an absolute fact. And that is why I'm going to tell you this. You cannot trust the science. They are lying to you. They will do anything they can in order to eliminate Christianity from their scientific biases. Anything it takes, including absolute abject insanity taught as fact. We see this again and again and again, that they lie and they lie and they lie in order to prove that their universe is uselessness, is in order to prove their God is real. That's why they're doing it. They believe that the universe is God, so everything has to begin and end there. And if it doesn't, there's a problem and they have to start over. And they're like, no, we can't do this. And that's why I believe that we need to have Christian scientists stand up and say, this is stupid. And they need to risk their careers to do it. That's the reality. People are going to make so much fun of this idea. You have no idea. People hate the idea that macroevolution might not be real. But it's not. Use your dialectic reasoning. Follow along with the train of thought. There's even more things that we could have talked about too that prove against this, but I've decided to cut it down to a smaller section here. But look it up. Be rational. Think about the implications of what it would mean for things to be able to macro-evolve. And you will see very quickly that is crazy. It's not real. It's never been real, and it never will be real. The order of the cosmos is perfect. You can't take anything out of nature without damaging it. You can't change it without damaging it. Nature is fragile. We've seen this. We proved this beyond a shadow of a doubt in the modern world, less so in the postmodern world, but it's still happening. Nature is easily broken. Yeah, tigers and elephants look fierce, but man, they ain't hard to kill, man. They're almost all extinct. You know, the rhino just went extinct. The white rhino just went extinct a little bit ago, a few years ago. Tragedy. Why did it happen? Because humans can destroy anything we want. Nature's fragile. It's not this incredible toy that you can mess with and, all these amazing things will pop out of it. No, it's delicate. And our job is to protect it. That's why we're here. It's one of the main reasons why we're here is to protect this beautiful, beautiful, incredible world that we live in. Anyways, that's it for today. Thanks for jumping on the Traditional Press. Got a little bit fired up today because I've been so frustrated with this subject. I've been frustrated for years with the subject, and I talk about it, but you know what? It was time to create a video on the subject. It was necessary. It was time. Hopefully I'll change a few hearts and minds, though that is highly unlikely in today's highly divisive world. But I hope that you learned something today and were able to walk with me through this process. Appreciate every single one of you amazing people that listen to this video. You're all amazing. Thanks for jumping on the Traditional Press. If you are still with me today, I think that I've earned a little subscribe there, maybe a like or two. I hope so, maybe not, but that's my hope and dream here. So thank you guys, and I will catch you all next time.
This has been the Traditional Press Podcast. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for more traditional ideas and exploration of the why behind the what.